The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of the Sunset Diner, a roadside establishment that had seen better days. The faded paint on its exterior walls told stories of countless travelers who had stopped for a quick meal before continuing their journeys. Inside, the familiar sounds of sizzling bacon and clinking coffee cups created a comforting atmosphere that masked the tension about to unfold. Sarah Martinez sat alone in a corner booth, her weathered hands wrapped around a steaming cup of black coffee. To anyone watching, she appeared to be just another middle-aged woman taking a break from the road. Her simple jeans and plain sweater gave no indication of the extraordinary life she had lived or the secrets she carried. Her graying hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her face bore the kind of lines that came from years of experience rather than mere age. What the other patrons didn't know was that Sarah was Admiral Sarah Martinez, one of the most decorated officers in the United States Navy. She had spent over 25 years serving her country, climbing through the ranks with determination and skill that had earned her respect from colleagues and subordinates alike. Her journey had taken her from the rigorous training of the Naval Academy to the most classified operations in hostile territories around the world. The diner was busier than usual for a Tuesday morning. Truck drivers occupied several tables, their conversation mixing with the sounds of breakfast being prepared. A family with young children sat near the window, the parents trying to manage excited toddlers while enjoying their meal. The atmosphere was peaceful, ordinary, and completely unsuspecting of what was about to happen. Sarah had chosen this particular diner for a reason. She was on her way to a classified meeting at a naval base 3 hours away, traveling in civilian clothes to maintain the secrecy of her mission. The briefcase beside her contained documents that could change the course of international relations, intelligence gathered through years of careful work by her team. The meeting would determine how this information would be used to protect national security. As she reviewed the morning newspaper, Sarah noticed 3 men enter the diner. Their movements were too coordinated, their scanning of the room too systematic. Years of training had taught her to recognize potential threats, and every instinct was now alert. The men were dressed casually, but their posture and the way they positioned themselves around the restaurant suggested they were anything but ordinary customers. The first man was tall and lean with short-cropped hair and a scar running down his left cheek. His eyes moved constantly, cataloging every person and exit in the room. The second was broader, more muscular, with the kind of build that suggested hours spent in a gym. The third man seemed to be their leader, carrying himself with an authority that made other patrons unconsciously step aside as he moved through the diner. Sarah continued reading her newspaper, but her peripheral vision tracked their movements. They ordered coffee but barely touched it, their attention focused on studying the other customers. She recognized the pattern immediately. They were looking for someone. The question was whether that someone was her, or if she had simply walked into the middle of someone else's operation. 20 minutes passed in tense observation. Sarah had developed the ability to appear completely relaxed while remaining in a state of high alert. It was a skill that had served her well in numerous dangerous situations throughout her career. She knew how to blend in, how to become invisible in plain sight, and how to assess threats without revealing her own capabilities. The leader of the 3 men approached the counter and spoke quietly with the waitress, a young woman named Jenny who had been working at the diner for several years. From her booth, Sarah could see Jenny's expression change from friendly customer service to confusion and, then, concern. The man was showing her something, likely a photograph, and asking questions. Sarah's training kicked in automatically. She began planning escape routes, identifying potential weapons within reach, and assessing which of the other customers might be innocent bystanders who could be harmed if violence erupted. The briefcase containing the classified documents remained beside her, its contents too valuable to abandon, but potentially dangerous if it fell into the wrong hands. The conversation at the counter grew more intense. Jenny was shaking her head, clearly uncomfortable with whatever the man was asking. Sarah could see that the young waitress was trying to be helpful, but didn't have the information the men wanted. The other 2 men had positioned themselves near the exits, a classic tactical formation that confirmed Sarah's suspicions about their true nature. As the minutes ticked by, Sarah realized that these men were indeed looking for her. The timing of their arrival, their systematic approach, and Their coordination all pointed to a planned operation. Someone had discovered her travel route and sent a team to intercept her. The question now was whether they were foreign agents, domestic criminals, or something else entirely. The leader returned to his companions, and Sarah could see them exchanging quiet words. Their body language suggested frustration. They had expected to find their target easily, and were now dealing with an unexpected complication. Sarah knew she had the advantage of being trained for exactly this type of situation, but she also understood that any action she took could put innocent people at risk. A new customer entered the diner, an elderly gentleman with a walking cane who moved slowly to an empty table. Behind him came a young mother with two small children, their cheerful voices adding to the ambient noise of the restaurant. Sarah's heart rate increased as she realized how many innocent lives could be affected if this situation escalated. The three men began moving through the diner more aggressively, approaching tables and showing what appeared to be photographs to the customers. Their pretense of being casual visitors was dropping away, replaced by an urgency that made their true intentions increasingly obvious. Sarah watched as confusion and fear began to spread among the other patrons. At the table nearest to Sarah's booth, the men stopped and began questioning an elderly couple who were finishing their breakfast. The woman looked frightened, while her husband tried to be helpful despite his obvious confusion about what the men wanted. Sarah could see that the situation was rapidly approaching a tipping point where innocent people could be harmed. The leader of the group was becoming increasingly agitated. He barked orders at his companions in a language Sarah recognized but couldn't immediately place. Their search was taking too long, drawing too much attention, and creating too much risk of law enforcement intervention. Sarah knew that desperate people in high-pressure situations often made dangerous decisions. As the men continued their systematic search of the diner, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She had spent her career protecting others and serving her country, and she would not allow innocent civilians to be endangered because of her presence. The classified documents in her briefcase were important, but they were not worth the lives of the families and individuals sharing this space with her. Sarah finished her coffee and placed several bills on the table, enough to cover her meal and a generous tip for Jenny. She gathered her belongings, including the crucial briefcase, and stood up from the booth. The time for hiding was over. Whatever these men wanted, they would have to deal with Admiral Sarah Martinez directly, not search through innocent bystanders hoping to find their target. Her movement caught the attention of the leader, who looked up from questioning the elderly couple. For a moment, their eyes met across the diner. Sarah saw recognition flash in his expression. Somehow, he knew exactly who she was. The game of cat and mouse was over, and what happened next would determine not only Sarah's fate, but the safety of everyone else in the restaurant. The morning that had started peacefully at the Sunset Diner was about to become something none of the customers had expected when they stopped for breakfast. Sarah Martinez had faced dangerous situations throughout her military career, but this time she was alone, surrounded by civilians, and facing an enemy whose capabilities and intentions remained unknown. The next few minutes would test every skill she had learned in over 2 decades of service to her country. The recognition in the leader's eyes confirmed Sarah's worst fears. These men had not stumbled upon her by accident. They had been specifically hunting for Admiral Sarah Martinez. As she stood beside her booth, briefcase in hand, she could feel the atmosphere in the diner shift dramatically. The casual morning routine of breakfast and conversation was about to shatter. The leader spoke sharply to his companions, and immediately all 3 men began moving toward her position. Their coordination was professional, their approach tactical, but Sarah noticed something crucial. They were trying to maintain the appearance of normalcy for the sake of the other customers. This suggested they either wanted to avoid civilian casualties or were concerned about drawing law enforcement attention. Either way, it gave her an advantage she could exploit. Sarah began walking toward the front of the diner, moving at a steady pace that appeared calm, but positioned her closer to the main exit. As she moved, she activated her peripheral vision training, tracking the positions of all 3 men while appearing to focus straight ahead. The leader was approaching from her left, trying to intercept her path to the door. The muscular man was moving to block the rear exit, while the third was positioning himself near the counter. Jenny, the young waitress, sensed the tension building in the room. Her experience working the morning shift had taught her to recognize when trouble was brewing, and she moved closer to the phone behind the counter. Sarah caught her eye and gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head. A call to law enforcement at this moment could escalate the situation dangerously for everyone involved. The elderly couple that had been questioned earlier were gathering their belongings hurriedly, clearly uncomfortable with the changing atmosphere. The truck drivers had stopped their conversation and were watching the unfolding situation with the alertness of men accustomed to recognizing trouble. The family with young children remained oblivious to the danger. The parents focused on managing their toddler's breakfast. As Sarah reached the center of the diner, the leader stepped directly into her path. He was younger than she had initially estimated, probably in his early 30s, with the kind of physical conditioning that suggested military or paramilitary training. When he spoke, his accent confirmed her earlier suspicion. He was not American, though she still couldn't place his exact origin. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice carrying a false politeness that didn't reach his eyes. "I wonder if you could help us with something. We're looking for someone, and we think you might know where she is." His hand moved slightly beneath his jacket, a gesture Sarah recognized as positioning for a quick draw of a concealed weapon. Sarah maintained her composure, drawing on decades of experience in high-pressure situations. "I'm sorry, but I don't think I can help you," she replied, her voice steady and pleasant. "I'm just passing through town myself." As she spoke, she was calculating distances, identifying potential weapons within reach, and assessing the capabilities of her opponents based on their positioning and body language. The muscular man had now blocked the rear exit completely, while the third member of their team had positioned himself where he could observe the entire diner. Their formation was professional, but Sarah noticed they had made a critical error. They had focused so intently on containing her that they had ignored the kitchen entrance, which likely led to a back door used for deliveries. "I think you're being modest," the leader continued, his false smile never wavering. "We have reason to believe you're exactly the person we're looking for. Why don't you come with us so we can discuss this more privately?" His companions had moved closer, creating a triangle formation around Sarah that would make escape difficult for an ordinary civilian. The other customers in the diner were becoming increasingly aware that something was wrong. The truck drivers had stopped eating and were whispering among themselves. One of them, a grizzled veteran with marine tattoos visible on his forearms, was studying the situation with the kind of tactical awareness that suggested military experience. Sarah made a mental note. If violence erupted, he might be an ally rather than just another civilian to protect. Sarah's years of training in psychological operations kicked in. She knew that maintaining the appearance of being an ordinary, frightened civilian might give her crucial advantages. "I really don't know what you're talking about," she said, allowing a slight tremor to enter her voice. "Please just let me go. I don't want any trouble." The leader's confidence grew at her apparent fear. "There's no need to be afraid," he said, stepping closer. "We just need you to come with us for a little while. Think of it as helping your country." The irony of his words was not lost on Sarah. She had spent her entire adult life genuinely helping her country, often at great personal risk. Behind the counter, Jenny was growing more nervous by the minute. She had worked at the diner long enough to recognize when customers were in real danger, and every instinct told her to call for help. Sarah caught her attention again and mouthed the word "wait," hoping the young woman would understand that premature intervention could make things worse. The family with children had finished their breakfast and were preparing to leave. The mother had noticed the tension in the room and was hurrying her children along, gathering their belongings with the urgency of someone who wanted to be elsewhere quickly. Sarah was relieved to see them moving toward the exit. Fewer innocent bystanders meant more options for dealing with the threat. As the family passed close to Sarah's position, the leader made his move. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to insist that you come with us now," he said, reaching out to grasp her arm. It was the moment Sarah had been waiting for, the transition from verbal intimidation to physical contact that would justify her response. What happened next surprised everyone in the diner except Sarah herself. As the man's hand closed on her arm, she executed a perfect defensive maneuver that had been drilled into her through countless hours of training. Her free hand struck his wrist at precisely the right angle to break his grip, while her body moved in a fluid motion that positioned her behind him with his arm locked in a submission hold. The transformation from frightened civilian to trained warrior took less than 3 seconds. Suddenly, the leader of the group found himself immobilized by someone he had assumed was an easy target. His companions reacted immediately, reaching for their concealed weapons, but Sarah was already moving to her next position. "Everybody get down," Sarah commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed in life-or-death situations. The truck drivers responded instantly, their own military training recognizing the voice of a superior officer even if they didn't understand the circumstances. The elderly couple dropped behind their table, while Ginny ducked behind the counter. Sarah used the leader as a human shield while assessing her next moves. The muscular man had drawn a pistol but couldn't get a clear shot without risking his teammate. The third man was trying to circle around for a better angle, but the confined space of the diner limited his options. Sarah knew she had perhaps 10 seconds before they would risk shooting regardless of the consequences to their leader. The Marine veteran among the truck drivers had recognized what was happening. He began moving to flank the third attacker, his own combat experience guiding his actions. Sarah saw his movement and realized she had gained an unexpected ally. The dynamics of the situation were shifting rapidly, but she still had to protect the civilians while neutralizing the threat. "Who sent you?" Sarah demanded, applying pressure to the leader's arm that made him gasp in pain. "What do you want with the documents?" Her question confirmed what the attackers had suspected. She was indeed carrying something valuable, something worth mounting a complex operation to obtain. The muscular man with the pistol was growing impatient. "Let him go, or people start dying," he shouted, gesturing toward the cowering civilians. It was exactly the kind of escalation Sarah had hoped to avoid, but she recognized the desperation in his voice. These men were under pressure to complete their mission, and desperate people made dangerous choices. Sarah's mind raced through her options. She could maintain her current position, but eventually the standoff would have to end, and she couldn't protect everyone indefinitely. She could attempt to disarm the gunman, but the distance and the presence of civilians made that extremely risky. Or she could try something unexpected, something that would shift the entire dynamic of the confrontation. The briefcase containing the classified documents sat on the floor where she had dropped it during her defensive maneuver. All three attackers kept glancing at it, confirming that the documents were indeed their primary objective. Sarah realized that the briefcase might be her most valuable tool in resolving this situation without further bloodshed. As the tension in the diner reached a breaking point, Sarah made a decision that would determine the outcome of this deadly confrontation. The next few moments would test every aspect of her training, her experience, and her commitment to protecting innocent lives while safeguarding national security. The quiet morning at the Sunset Diner had become a battlefield, and Admiral Sarah Martinez was ready to fight. Sarah's grip on the leader tightened as she made her calculated decision. "You want the briefcase?" she called out to the gunman. "Fine. But first, you're going to let every civilian in this diner walk out safely." She began moving slowly toward the briefcase, using her captive as a shield while keeping her eyes on both remaining attackers. The muscular man with the pistol exchanged glances with his companion, clearly uncertain about how to proceed. Their mission parameters had likely included maintaining a low profile, and the situation had already spiraled far beyond their original plan. Sarah could see the conflict in their body language. Complete the mission or cut their losses and retreat. "You're in no position to make demands," the gunman replied, but his voice lacked conviction. Sarah had spent years learning to read people under pressure, and she could sense his uncertainty. The fact that they hadn't simply opened fire suggested they needed her alive, or at minimum, they needed the documents intact. The Marine veteran among the truck drivers had continued his flanking maneuver and was now positioned behind an overturned table within striking distance of the third attacker. Sarah caught his eye and gave him a subtle hand signal, military communication that transcended service branches. He nodded almost imperceptibly, confirming his readiness to act on her command. Ginny remained crouched behind the counter, her hand hovering over the telephone. Sarah could see the young woman's internal struggle between following orders to wait and her natural instinct to call for help. The situation was clearly beyond anything the local police were equipped to handle, but their arrival could complicate matters further. "Look around you," Sarah said, addressing the gunman while maintaining her hold on the leader. "This isn't going according to plan, is it? You've got witnesses, you've lost the element of surprise, and now you're in a standoff with someone who clearly isn't the easy target you expected." Her calm analysis was designed to make them reconsider their options. The elderly couple remained hidden behind their table, but Sarah could hear the woman whimpering softly. The truck drivers, following their military instincts, had taken defensive positions that would allow them to protect civilians if necessary. The family with children had successfully escaped during the initial confrontation, removing Sarah's biggest concern about innocent casualties. The leader in Sarah's grasp attempted to speak, but she applied pressure to his windpipe that reduced his words to a strangled whisper. "Your friend here is running out of air," she announced. "Every second you delay makes his situation worse. Let the civilians go, and we can discuss terms for the briefcase." What Sarah hadn't revealed was the true nature of the documents in the briefcase. While they were indeed classified and valuable, they were not the originals. As a precautionary measure for this type of travel, she had been carrying carefully prepared copies that would appear authentic under casual examination, but contained subtle alterations that would make them useless for any hostile purpose. The real documents were safely stored in a naval intelligence facility hundreds of miles away. The gunman was wavering, his weapon moving between Sarah and the various civilians in the diner. His training was insufficient for this type of complex situation, and Sarah could see his confidence cracking under pressure. The third attacker was trying to maintain his position while watching for the Marine veteran who had seemed to disappear behind the overturned furniture. "Time's running out," Sarah announced, applying additional pressure to her captive's arm until he gasped audibly. "Your leader needs medical attention. The local police have probably been alerted by now, and every minute you stay here reduces your chances of escape. Take the briefcase and go, or this gets much worse for everyone." The gunman made his decision. "Everyone on the ground now," he shouted, sweeping his weapon across the room. It was exactly the wrong choice. Escalating to direct threats against civilians crossed a line that Sarah could not permit. She had given him opportunities to resolve this peacefully, and he had chosen violence instead. Sarah's response was immediate and decisive. She released her grip on the leader and dove toward the briefcase while simultaneously shouting "now" to her Marine ally. The veteran truck driver emerged from behind the overturned table like a force of nature, tackling the third attacker before he could bring his own weapon to bear. The leader, suddenly, free but disoriented, stumbled forward trying to regain his balance. Sarah reached the briefcase and immediately hurled it toward the kitchen entrance, knowing that removing the primary objective from the immediate area would force the attackers to make new decisions under pressure. The gunman tracked the briefcase's movement and made a critical error. He turned his weapon away from the civilians to follow its trajectory. Sarah used that moment to close the distance between them, her years of close-quarters combat training guiding every movement. The space was confined, giving her advantages over someone relying primarily on firepower. Behind the overturned table, the Marine veteran had successfully subdued his opponent, using techniques that suggested Special Forces training. The third attacker's weapon skittered across the floor while out of reach. One threat neutralized, two remaining, with the tactical situation improving by the second. Sarah reached the gunman just as he was turning back toward her. Her first strike targeted his weapon hand, a precise blow designed to disrupt his grip without causing unnecessary permanent damage. The pistol discharged once, the bullet embedding harmlessly in the ceiling as his fingers spasmed on the trigger. The weapon fell to the floor, changing the entire dynamic of the confrontation. The leader was recovering from his disorientation and reaching for his own concealed weapon, but Sarah was already moving to engage him. Years of training in multiple combat disciplines had prepared her for exactly this type of multi-opponent scenario. Her movements were fluid, efficient, and calculated to end the threat as quickly as possible while minimizing risk to the civilians. Jenny, behind the counter, finally made the call to emergency services. "There's a fight at the Sunset Diner on Highway 9, she reported, her voice shaking but clear. "People with guns. Send police and ambulances." Sarah heard the call but remained focused on the immediate threat in front of her. The disarmed gunman attempted to grapple with Sarah, but his training was no match for her decades of experience. She used his own momentum against him, executing a throw that sent him crashing into an empty table with enough force to discourage further resistance. The impact left him conscious, but clearly unwilling to continue fighting. The leader had finally drawn his weapon, but found himself facing an opponent who had moved inside his effective range before he could bring it to bear. Sarah's training in weapon retention and disarming techniques took over, and within seconds the pistol was in her control rather than his. The tables had turned completely. She was now the one holding the weapon, while 3 attackers found themselves at her mercy. "Face down on the floor, hands behind your heads," Sarah commanded, her voice carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. The 3 men complied, their aggression replaced by the resignation of professionals who recognized when they had been outclassed. The Marine veteran approached Sarah, his own defensive posture relaxing as the immediate threat ended. "Ma'am, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, retired Marines," he introduced himself. "Looked like you could use some backup." His respectful tone suggested he recognized Sarah's superior training and leadership, even without knowing her actual rank. "Thank you, Sergeant," Sarah replied, maintaining her watch on the 3 prisoners while scanning for any additional threats. "Your assistance was invaluable." She could hear sirens approaching in the distance. Jenny's call had brought help, but Sarah knew the real complications were just beginning. The briefcase lay near the kitchen entrance where she had thrown it during the confrontation. Sarah realized she would need to retrieve it before law enforcement arrived, as explaining the classified nature of its contents would create additional complications for everyone involved. The documents might be copies, but they still contained enough real information to cause problems if they fell into the wrong hands. As the sirens grew louder, Sarah began planning her next moves. The 3 attackers would need to be turned over to federal authorities rather than local police, given the national security implications of their mission. She would need to contact her superiors to arrange proper handling of the situation while protecting the identities and safety of the civilians who had become involved through no fault of their own. The confrontation at the Sunset Diner was over, but Sarah knew this was likely just the beginning of a larger operation. Someone had discovered her travel plans and deployed a professional team to intercept her. That suggested a security breach at a very high level, one that would need to be investigated thoroughly to prevent future attacks. Looking around the diner at the overturned tables, shaken civilians, and defeated attackers, Sarah reflected on how quickly a routine morning had transformed into a combat situation. But as the sirens reached the parking lot, and she prepared to transition from combat mode to the complex process of explaining what had happened, she knew that her years of training and experience had once again served their purpose, protecting innocent lives and safeguarding national security. The first police cruisers arrived with sirens wailing, their occupants emerging with weapons drawn and confusion evident on their faces. The scene before them defied easy explanation. An apparently ordinary diner with overturned furniture, 3 men lying face down on the floor, and a middle-aged woman in civilian clothes holding a pistol with professional competence. Sarah immediately secured the weapon and raised her hands in a non-threatening position. "Officers, I'm Admiral Sarah Martinez, United States Navy," she announced clearly. These 3 individuals attempted to assault civilian customers and steal classified government documents. "I'm going to reach slowly for my identification." Her calm, authoritative manner helped establish credibility with the responding officers. The lead police officer, Sergeant Williams according to his name tag, approached cautiously while his partner maintained overwatch. His 15 years of experience had taught him to recognize when situations were more complicated than they initially appeared. The woman's bearing, her precise terminology, and the tactical way she had secured the scene all suggested military training far beyond what civilians typically possessed. Sarah carefully retrieved her military identification and diplomatic passport from her jacket pocket, moving slowly to avoid any misunderstandings with officers whose adrenaline was undoubtedly elevated. "Sergeant, this is a matter of national security," she explained as she handed over her credentials. "These documents will confirm my identity, and I need to contact my superiors immediately to arrange proper handling of the situation." Behind the counter, Jenny emerged from her hiding spot, visibly shaken but unharmed. The other civilians began rising from their defensive positions, looking around at the aftermath of what had seemed like an ordinary morning turned into an action movie. The elderly couple clung to each other, while the truck drivers maintained their alert postures, still processing what they had witnessed. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez approached the police officers with his own identification ready. "Officers, Rodriguez, retired Marines. I can confirm this lady handled herself like a professional. These three came in looking for trouble, and she dealt with it to protect everyone here." His testimony carried weight with the local officers, who respected military service. The three attackers remained prone on the floor, offering no resistance now that law enforcement had arrived. Sarah could see them exchanging glances, likely wondering how much their capture would reveal about whoever had sent them. Their professional demeanor suggested they had been briefed on capture protocols, which meant extracting useful intelligence from them would be challenging. Sergeant Williams examined Sarah's credentials carefully, comparing the photograph to her face and noting the high security clearance levels indicated on her identification. His expression shifted from suspicion to professional respect as he realized he was dealing with someone far above his usual jurisdiction. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to verify these credentials and contact federal authorities. This is beyond local police scope." "Absolutely, Sergeant," Sarah agreed. "I need to contact Naval Intelligence immediately, and we'll need FBI involvement for the captured individuals. They were attempting to steal classified documents related to national security operations." She gestured toward the briefcase, which still lay near the kitchen entrance where she had thrown it during the confrontation. The restaurant had become a crime scene, with yellow tape being strung around the perimeter as additional police units arrived. The civilians who had witnessed the confrontation would need to provide statements, but Sarah knew their testimony would need to be carefully managed to protect operational security. Too much detail in public records could compromise ongoing intelligence operations. Jenny approached nervously, still shaken by the morning's events. "Ma'am, I don't really understand what happened, but thank you for protecting us," she said quietly. "Those men were scaring everyone, asking strange questions, and showing pictures around. I've never seen anything like what you did." Her genuine gratitude reminded Sarah why she had chosen a career in service to others. "You did exactly the right thing by staying calm and calling for help when it was safe," Sarah assured her. "Your actions helped ensure everyone stayed safe." She made a mental note to ensure Jenny received some form of recognition for her professionalism under pressure, possibly through her employer or local community organizations. Within 30 minutes, federal agents began arriving at the scene. Sarah recognized the efficiency of their response. Someone in Naval Intelligence had made phone calls that expedited the process significantly. Agent Thompson from the FBI introduced himself and immediately began coordinating with local police to secure the scene and manage the flow of information. The three captured attackers were separated and placed in different vehicles for transport to federal facilities where they could be interrogated properly. Sarah observed their calm acceptance of capture, noting that they showed no signs of panic or attempts to escape. Professional operatives, definitely, but working for whom remained to be determined. Dr. Patricia Chun from Naval Intelligence arrived by helicopter, landing in the diner's parking lot with the kind of dramatic flair that drew attention from gathering news media. As Sarah's direct superior on this particular operation, Dr. Chun had the authority to manage the situation's classification levels and coordinate with other government agencies. "Admiral Martinez," Dr. Chun said as she approached, her expression mixing relief with concern. "Are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" Her first priority was Sarah's well-being, but Sarah could see the strategic calculations already running behind her eyes: damage assessment, security implications, and operational adjustments. "I'm fine, Director," Sarah reported. "No injuries to any civilians, 3 attackers in custody, and the documents are secure. However, we clearly have a significant security breach to investigate. Someone knew my travel route, timing, and mission specifics. The implications were serious enough to require immediate investigation by counterintelligence specialists." The briefcase was retrieved and secured by federal agents using proper chain of custody procedures. Sarah would brief Dr. Chen privately on the fact that the documents were copies rather than originals, information that would affect how the interrogation of the captured operatives proceeded. Their reactions to learning they had risked exposure for false intelligence could provide valuable insights. News media had begun gathering outside the police perimeter, drawn by reports of gunfire and the presence of federal agents. Sarah knew that managing the public information about this incident would be crucial for protecting ongoing operations. Too much detail could compromise other intelligence assets, while too little might invite unwanted speculation. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was providing his statement to federal agents, his military background making him an ideal witness for official reports. His training allowed him to provide precise, factual descriptions without speculation or emotional coloring. Sarah was grateful for his assistance and made a note to ensure his actions received appropriate recognition through official channels. The elderly couple had been taken to a separate area where victim services coordinators were helping them process the traumatic experience. Their statements would be important for establishing the attacker's methods and timeline, but their comfort and well-being took precedence over intelligence gathering needs. As the immediate crisis management concluded, Sarah began thinking about the larger implications of the morning's events. Someone with access to highly classified information had betrayed her mission details to hostile actors. The security breach investigation would need to examine communications, personnel access, and operational protocols to identify how the leak had occurred. Dr. Chin approached Sarah privately, away from the other officials and media attention. "We need to debrief immediately," she said quietly. "The implications of this attack extend beyond your particular mission. We may be dealing with a broader intelligence compromise that affects multiple operations." Her expression was grim, suggesting she suspected the scope of the problem. "Understood, Director," Sarah replied. "I recommend we also consider protective measures for the civilian witnesses. If our security was compromised enough to allow this attack, we can't assume the hostiles won't attempt to silence potential testimony." The safety of innocent people who had become involved through circumstance remained her primary concern. The three attackers had been transported to federal detention facilities where specialized interrogation teams would work to extract information about their handlers, mission objectives, and operational methods. Sarah knew that professional operatives were trained to resist questioning, but the unexpected nature of their capture might provide advantages to skilled interrogators. As the sun climbed higher and the diner parking lot gradually returned to normal activity, Sarah reflected on how quickly routine travel had become a combat situation. Her years of training had prepared her for exactly this type of scenario, but the presence of innocent civilians had added complexity that required split-second decisions with potentially deadly consequences. The investigation into who had betrayed her mission details would take weeks or months to complete, involving detailed analysis of communication records, personnel movements, and operational security procedures. Sarah knew she would be involved in every aspect of that investigation, as both a victim of the security breach and a key witness to its consequences. Looking back at the Sunset Diner, now cordoned off as a federal crime scene, Sarah realized that what had started as a simple breakfast stop had become a defining moment in a larger intelligence operation. The morning's events would be analyzed, studied, and used to improve security procedures for future operations, but the memory of protecting innocent lives while safeguarding national security would remain with her as validation of her life's work in service to her country.